episodes 1 through 3 of this series on workplace conflict. If those episodes have shown anything, it's this. Workplace conflict is not just a people problem, and it's not just a communication problem. Very often, it's an organizational readiness problem. If HR might be stepping in late sometimes, if managers are improvising, if the same patterns keep happening across teams, or if conflict is quietly driving turnover, burnout, and lost productivity, then the real question is no longer just, how do we handle this case? The real question is, how ready is this organization to prevent, assess, and respond to conflict as well as an organization? That's what we're talking about today. Welcome to It's All Your Fault on True Story FM, the one and only podcast dedicated to helping you with the most challenging human interactions, those involving high conflict situations. I'm Megan Hunter, and I'm here with my co-host, Bill Eddy.
Hi, everybody.
And we're joined again in this wonderful series with Michael Lomax from British Columbia, Canada. We learned in the last episode, Michael is one of our highly esteemed speakers and trainers here at High Conflict Institute, and is also a mediator and lawyer in Canada with a lot of years of experience.
Yeah, great to be with you, Megan and Bill.
You've had your fair share of managing high conflict in the workplace and teaching others about it within, a workplace you might be in, as well as training around the world. So we're really happy you've joined us for this fourth and final episode in this series. Welcome, listeners. Thank you for joining us on your South Pole exploration today. In this series, we've built a clear progression. Episode 1, why workplace conflict is increasing. Episode 2, how to assess workplace conflict. Episode 3, what are some tools that leaders can use to respond more effectively in high conflict. And across any conflict, right? We didn't even talk about that, but maybe we'll address that in this episode, that this isn't just for high conflict, this is for all conflict. In this episode, we're going to take a bigger picture view. How do organizations move from handling conflict one case at a time to becoming truly conflict ready or even conflict proof, if that's possible? We'll talk about why a case-by-case response is often not enough, kind of how to uncover the real cost of conflict, and what it takes to build a more conflict ready, conflict smart, or conflict proof organization over time. We think it's critical. We think that it's possible. This is especially for HR leaders, executives, and organizations that are ready to stop treating conflict as a series of isolated incidents and start addressing it as a strategic business issue. So, Bill and Michael, we've spent a lot of time at High Conflict Institute and on this podcast and all the work we do in this area, talking about sort of these more specific case-by-case situations. How do you handle this situation? How do you handle it when someone is constantly blaming or complaining? How do you handle accusations of harassments? How do you tell who's telling the truth and who's making false allegations? Lots of things like that. And what we're trying to do now is expand it into the whole organization, which we've taken steps already with the coaching program, New Ways for Work coaching, New Ways for Work for leaders. Now we're going even bigger picture. Let's really see if we can help organizations become conflict smart, conflict proof. Is it possible? So first I want to start with, at what point does a workplace conflict stop from being a series of individual cases and start becoming an organizational problem, Michael? Like sometimes there are those who finally realize the issue might be systemic, maybe not isolated. What have you seen?
Well, what I can say is when you have a high conflict individual at the center of a conflict, what's different about it? Because again, conflict is normal in the human sort of set of relationships at work. It happens all the time. And again, even good things can come from conflict. It's very often how we work through it. But when we sometimes look at a way an individual is showing up, they're complaining about an issue, and then we resolve that one. Then there's another one. They're complaining about how their supervisor deals with them, or complaining about a colleague, or they didn't get the right workspace, whatever it may be. And there seems to be a genesis of this. The persistence of high conflict behavior, of this kind of stuff showing up, and its pattern. So it repeats across situations. It may seem like, okay, well, they're really upset about this one thing. If we resolve that for them, then this will resolve. And yet then it pops up somewhere else on something completely different. And so there's this pattern that goes across situations. It's persistent over time, over years. Lots of people saying to me, this person's always been like this, 10 years, that kind of thing. And the other problem is it pulls others in. It spreads. And so either it isn't that everybody in the workplace recognize, okay, this person is a high conflict personality. You got to be careful around them. You got to avoid them. There will be some who have formed that view. There will be others who feel we got to support this person. We got to protect them. I feel sorry for them. Or they're charismatic. They recruit others into, this is an injustice, this thing the organization is doing. We need to take the organization on this, or our leader's terrible. Look at all the things they do wrong. They don't care about the team. They don't care about people. And sometimes it can be soothing. Like, I don't know that we can stop gossip. It's the thing that people do, but it's when it gets destructive. And at the end of that conversation, the person we're talking about, let's say it's the leader that this individual's bashing, everybody's kind of worse off. The leader becomes more of a one-dimensional evil character. There was something, I don't know, in a negative way, enjoyable about that conversation, but I feel worse, and the team is worse off. And so, and it uses high conflict behavior, uses up systems very heavily with multiple complaints. And again, I've seen HR where sometimes they realize what they're dealing with, but it's more feels like a crisis than it is right now. Here's how we handle this. We have our approach. And I've even seen you'll be able to tell me more about why this happens, Bill. The leader and the HR person end up in conflict with each other. And the HR person feeling blamed by the leader. Why aren't you helping me? Or the leader is hooked. And then the HR person is feeling attacked and blamed, and then the whole thing starts to break down, right? And then in terms of bigger problems for organizations when they aren't able to handle this stuff well, it is the impact on the individuals, emotional, psychological strain, burnout, sick leave, withdrawal, and engagement. Lots of people just avoiding that person, or I'm not going to speak up at team meetings, that kind of thing. It's not a good idea to do that. It's not safe to do that kind of thing. And so it can affect the whole team. As I've said, the impact on the team, people get pulled into gossip. Something is still very fascinating or attractive about it. Triangulation, there's always someone who's on the outs, and very often it isn't the high conflict person, it's someone else. And people working around the individual rather than with them, walking on eggshells is again another flag. When I hear that term, people talking about that at work, I know there's probably a high conflict individual somewhere. Leaders, again, when I started as a junior leader I was in the Army Reserve for over 35 years, and they said to me as a junior leader, 20% of the people will take up 80% of your time. They knew that back then, right? But they didn't necessarily know why or what you do about it. They just would tell you this. And so you're getting a disproportionate amount of time spent on this individual, managing this individual. And then the leader doesn't have the time to focus on other things. They start to doubt themselves. They become, I've heard the word exhausted. I don't know how many times I've heard that word when I ask a leader, what's it like? Or chaos. Or even I'm afraid. So then I don't know what to do.
And I dread seeing this person.
Yeah. And I feel unsettled. And that is, your threat detectors on some level are saying, it's not that this person's necessarily a physical threat, they're dangerous. Sometimes they can be. But there's a social threat. They are trying to undermine me. They are trying to get me to lose my job. And I've seen that where the person is documenting everything the leader is doing from a distorted standpoint and trying to get people higher up in the organization. This person's doing financial improprieties. They're breaking the rules. They're bending the rules. That kind of thing. So this leader is like, I'm afraid to engage with this person, tell them anything. And so then the organization itself, I guess the last thing I'll say is this systems increase in formal complaints and investigations. And I remember someone telling me a story about an organization that they finally brought in a respectful workplace policy. They didn't have one. And that you could file on a basis of harassment. And they said there was this one individual that everybody walked on eggshells around. They're afraid of this person. And they would make unreasonable requests of the organization, but nobody had ever given them any feedback about that, tried to correct it. And they said the day we brought in the policy, we got 3 complaints that day. And I go, oh, about the individual from others? No, from that individual about other people, right? And I've seen it where the person pulls on every lever they can think about. If you've got a kind of system-wide respectful workplace, kind of this organization is not following the policies, like a whistleblower one or that, they'll file that one. If their boss is a member of a professional organization, like they're an engineer, something outside of the workplace, they'll file one there. And then they'll pull on every lever they can inside. And then the difficulty again is we don't understand these patterns. Sometimes what we're dealing with, just step back and go, what might be going on? I remember talking to an investigator once because they called me up to ask me, what do you think? And this person had filed 5 different types of complaints, all these ones I mentioned. And they were like, well, where there's smoke, there's fire. Like there must be something going on for a person to do all of that kind of complaining. And I go, well, or it could be this other thing where it's actually quite distorted. And if anything, the individual filing the complaints could be the person who's in the wrong. And I, based on what they told me, I believe that this person was the one that was breaking the rules and committing crimes at work, if you will. And yet the investigators kind of pulled in the wrong direction because they don't understand what they're dealing with, even to sort of just step back and go, like you talk about, Bill, is it possible that this is what's going on? And then how am I going to engage in that? Not that I've decided that. If I'm doing an investigation, how am I going to do this investigation where I'm open to that possibility? Because and same with HR. This is not a crisis. This is, we pull out this checklist that we have and we're all trained in it. The leader's trained in it. We're trained in it. Off we go.
Well, Bill, I've seen you busy writing there, so I think you have a lot to say.
Yeah, a lot of notes here. So let me start at the highest level is I think organizations need to have policies, and they do around sexual harassment, but they don't generally around bullying. And often that's what we see with high conflict people. And the solution really is developing policies and having participation from as many different groups as possible. So you have from leadership, from HR, from if there's a union, from union, if you have people, different parts of the organization, that you develop policies really engaging everybody to some extent so that people buy into the standards. So policies are one thing. A second is really training. And part of the training, I think, always has to address what Michael was just talking about, and that is learning the 3 theories of the high conflict case. It may be person A says person B is acting very badly, and it may be true, or person B may be doing just fine, and it's person A making the complaint who's acting very badly, or they're both acting very badly. And there's no easy formula, but if you recognize patterns of behavior, especially high conflict patterns, especially preoccupation with blaming others, that's kind of the hallmark feature of high conflict personalities. And it confuses organizations because they're trying to be sensitive to complaints. And yet the people that like to complain the most tend to be high conflict people because that's kind of part of their life. And so you have to be able to figure out, is it this person or is it this person? And I've talked to people in organizations, for example, in Australia, where they have more anti-bullying formal involvement and more investigations. And I've talked to people saying, I remember this one woman said, in my husband's workplace, he was accused by a high conflict person. And for 6 months, people are like looking askance at him until it starts getting figured out. Wait a minute, it's not him. And so the sleepless nights, the stomach aches, all that stuff can be you're the target of a high conflict person. When the whole organization treats you that way, you're picking on the wrong person, and those are the good people that leave, and the high conflict people stay. It's because they're good at complaining. So you have to be trained to be aware of that difference, that distinction. Now, mentioning Australia, and I know some of the people listening to our podcast are in Australia. I'll tell a quick story there. I presented at a program on workplace bullying about maybe even 15 years ago by now. They had just started some laws and more accountability, and they were doing workplace investigation. We were talking to, I don't know, a group of people who do the workplace investigations. And I said, what percent of complaints do you think are coming from the high conflict person rather than the person they're accusing, that it's really the complainant? And they kind of put their heads together and said maybe 40% right now. That you've got to know that a lot of your complaints are coming from the people that are the problem. So you can't make assumptions, but you also can't assume that a complainant is a high conflict person either. So you got to be careful. So this is a big part of the training. But I also think training leaders in skills of like the CARS method helps them manage cases more routinely. And then teaching employees the new ways for work coaching to get more able to not get bothered by coworkers making a comment and stuff like that. So I think policies, training, and really learning about high conflict and learning skills for managing that is at the organizational level, and trickling down needs to be what happens.
What about role modeling, Michael, by the leadership, top tiers?
There's a lot of things that have to come down from the top that they get given to HR and saying, okay, you gotta run this for us. We're very busy. So run the Respectful Workplace program, deliver the training, issue the policies, tell people why it's important, that kind of thing. And people are always watching for that. And so if something is really critical to the success of the organization, then you need senior leadership saying, this is important. This is what I want to see happen. Right. And, when I was in a senior leadership role and I came into an organization that I really wanted to make sure I was clear about how I wanted to see conflict dealt with in this organization, the unit that I was responsible for. So I said to the senior leaders that report to me, when we have problems, conflict on our teams, complaints, whatever's going on, I want you to intervene early. I want you to use an informal approach wherever possible, unless it's clearly not appropriate. And so when you bring me a problem, I'm going to ask you, did you engage as early as possible using a conflict resolution approach before we go down some other path? Even with high conflict behavior, we want to get in there early. We want to address these things and redirect it. We don't want to ideally get to the point where there's a big investigation that's going to take 6 months and the consequences are completely removed from what happened, right? And in the meantime. And so I said that, and then I had to follow through. That was the other thing. I told them that was important. This is what I'm going to do to reinforce it. And then when people came to me, I said, okay, have you used this approach? And the other thing I did was I stood in front of everyone in the organization and I told them that. So then it was real clear. So how do you do that through policy? How do you do that through other things, right? So that's what I would say. Things that are really important to the organization. You want to empower and engage leaders at every level, and you want to focus on your leaders. But the senior leadership need to say, this is a top priority to do this well.
And to continue to do it well, right? It's not a one-off.
Well, and it's very, I'm there with you. Like, go take a course. Great. Now I've got it. I know how to do it. And yet, statistically, within even a couple of weeks, if I don't use it, I've probably forgotten 90% of it. And I think this stuff is, for leaders, is muscle memory. You got to practice it. You got to get comfortable with it. It doesn't mean you can do it all at once, even though I think these are really simple, concrete skills that we can all do. It's still, sometimes it's the opposite of what we feel like doing. So I agree. You need the organization to support it and reinforce it rather than it being a one-off kind of course that you take and then to varying degrees, people pick it up and use it, right?
Right. And to be organization-wide, it has to go across every department. Everyone has to be on the same page, speaking the same language as we talked about in earlier episodes. There's not going to be a perfect solution, and there's always going to be some costs there. But just imagine if an organization skilled up every new employee at whatever level they come in, if they understand or learn the 4 big skills, which are how to manage your emotions, how to have flexible thinking, how to have moderate behaviors, and how to check yourself, which are the 4 opposites of high conflict behavior. So it isn't always, a problem of this is a bad, we're never going to say this is a problem of a bad person. We're just going to say this may be a person who is just lacking some skills. So why not help skill them up, particularly in an era where there's probably a lot of skills lacking because of what people are learning from social media, from other forms of media, television, reality TV, where big emotions and all of those things are rewarded.
You might be saying to someone, the way you text your friends outside work every day will get you fired here if you text your coworker like that. So you need to not do that. And we can't take certain things for granted anymore around values. For some people, it's good if it works for me, right? Instead of what does it mean for it to be good for the organization and you as an employee to support that, right? And we can't take for granted that people have all been taught the skills to regulate their emotions, to think flexibly. And I think when you do across the board that, you are really helping individuals that, you're going to still have these high conflict individuals in your workplace, but you're empowering them. How do I set my boundaries with this person? How do I stay connected with them so things don't escalate? And then that helps everybody, including that individual, engage better in the workplace. Yeah, I would say for an organization, it is focus on your leaders and your systems, top down. And then where you can, the value of giving everybody across the board. Some organizations recognize that conflict resolution, getting along with your coworkers, that's a core competency. Along with, you need to be able to do the forms and do the work properly. And I remember meeting a guy once and he said, I don't have to talk to my coworkers if I don't want to. There's no rule that says I have to. I'm like, actually, there is a rule that says you
Actually,
my coworkers, right? But he had convinced himself. So again, the more you're saying that's what we want, and then you're actually saying we're going to train you in how to use this computer system. But these other things are so important. We're going to train you in that too. And now we've told you what we're wanting. Now we can hold you accountable.
set the limit. And it doesn't have to be, a negative. Setting limits is a positive. I see setting limits as a gift, honestly, organization-wide and individually, because the cost, right? The cost of conflict to organizations is huge. What was the number? 359 billion workplace conflict crisis. It is big. What's it result in? We're talking absenteeism. It affects productivity, leadership time, retention, morale. These are big. There's burnout, the amount of money and time spent on investigations and just, perseverating about this. This is really big on an organization, and it doesn't have to be.
And sometimes spectacular failures,
Mm.
public failures that hurt the brand of the organization. I would say when leaders have skills and the HR have that structured approach, you've got a system, then even the 5% can be manageable. Again, there's always going to be some that you cannot, but you have that chance to be successful instead of it just being, we're in react mode. Oh my gosh. If you have an organization with 30,000 employees, again, I did the math last time, but you're going to have over 1,000 of these folks.
You're right. You're right.
Yeah, I think it was 1,500. I think that was episode 2 in the series. Yeah, I mean, this is big, and we feel here at HCI like we've been holding on to this secret for a long time. We've trained for 18 years, a lot in the workplace and courts and legal arena, education, healthcare, you name it. We really want to help organizations with the secret sauce because this does not have to impact the organization to the level it is. There is something that can be done, and it's not that difficult. It doesn't take years and years of planning, right? There are pretty significant shortcuts, but there has to be commitment, right? So, we want to come in and help us assess an organization's conflict readiness. And look, if there's a high score, then awesome, you're set, right? And I think at that point, your company is more valuable because you aren't spending time where on people issues. You're really spending time on teaching skills and getting down to the work that you're meant to do there. And people are having better relationships because it's a calmer environment, right? So it doesn't have to be case by case. It doesn't have to be something you dread. So what's it look like for an organization to be conflict ready, to be conflict smart, to be conflict proof? It's what we've discussed. It's getting everyone in the organization trained, getting them skilled up, and then continuing that. Right? It's not a one-off. It's practicing. It might take a year to get your organization really conflict proof, get them conflict ready. And that's okay, because think about the amount of time that is spent training in a technical aspect, right? I think in this day and age, we need to pay the same attention to the social aspect as well. So I want to ask each of you, do you think, because what we're talking about here is helping organizations make a choice. Do you want to be conflict ready? Do you want to be conflict smart? Or do you want to be conflict proof? Do you think, either of you, Bill or Michael, believe that an organization can be conflict proof?
You mean totally preventive and there's no conflict? I don't think that, but I think the resilience of being ready for conflict, manage conflict, having these systems in place, making conflict normal and resolution of conflict normal and prevention of conflict normal. I think that's the key. And that's where high conflict comes in. It catches everyone off guard, but doesn't have to. So I think that an organization can be, if you want to use conflict proof, in other words, it's not going to be knocked off its center because there's a conflict. Yes, I think that can happen. And I think so much of it is just having skills, having the positive attitude, and having really a positive organizational attitude. Because we're talking about conflict, but you also want to be a cheerleader for your organization. Make people happy, make them glad. It's like, I'm going to work now. I'm going to have a good day. And have that kind of attitude and feeling, I think, is all part of it. And there are organizations that do this well, but I think there's more that have difficulty and need help. So that's my thoughts.
No, I think you can absolutely build a culture where people are capable, effective of dealing with conflict, including these extremes that we're talking about here. And it's these extremes that can disrupt the whole system and disrupt the whole culture. That's a problem, is you may have had a positive culture and then one of these individuals drops in and all of a sudden. So I think you can do that. It takes commitment, and it's not something that, if you're like, we're here and we need to get to somewhere else, right? We're not there right now. That is I would say it is a multi-year commitment, but to change culture. But I have seen it in organizations. I have seen it where I'm working there and I know what it used to be like 10 years ago. And I turn to someone and I say, how do we handle this? And they say, this is what we do about this kind of stuff that we're talking about here today? And the answer is exactly what I was hoping for. And I'm like, okay, it's starting to pay off. This person is a junior leader in the organization, and they know how we handle these things and what to do. And they're an example of it. They are an example to their peers and the people that report to them of how to do it. But it is a multi-year commitment, and it is seeing it as part of your organizational culture, that it is a core competency for leaders and a core competency for your employees, and it has to be driven from the top down. This is what we want in this organization, this culture.
And it will reduce risk, right? It will make you more competitive. It will impact your bottom line. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just sometimes the costs seem to be hidden. They're not hidden. If you actually measure for it and look at it, they're not. But it's kind of this, it's not there the same as, you don't see it on a financial spreadsheet, the bottom line, but it is absolutely there.
Let me put in a plug for learning the kind of conflict skills we're talking about as an organizational benefit. So many times I've had people come up to me after a training and say, well, I'm going to use this at work, or I'm really going to use this with my sister or my neighbor or my uncle or somebody. And they say, this is a benefit. This is a mental health benefit to an organization to have people learn something they can use everywhere. And I want to put in a plug for it as a benefit.
I love that, right? So that could go in the benefits package. You're going to be able to handle conflict. And that is awesome. We'll end with that word. That was a very positive way to wrap this up. So I thank both of you for being part of this series and talking about high conflict and how we can, help organizations manage it and even prevent it to some extent, and really just what to do. It's possible. I thank you both, and I thank all of you listeners for listening to this 4-part series. We've moved from the problem to the assessment to the leader tools, and then taking a look at that bigger organizational question. The larger takeaway is this: organizations don't become healthier just by getting better at crisis response. They become healthier by becoming more prepared, more consistent, and more conflict capable. And that's where we can help at High Conflict Institute. We now work with organizations to help you get, to assess conflict readiness and identify the cost of conflict across the workplace, and then decide if you want to be conflict ready, conflict smart, or even conflict proof. So if you're ready to move beyond this reactive conflict management and toward a more strategic approach, we'll put that link right in the show notes, highconflictinstitute.com/corporate-partnership/. And if you found this series helpful, please subscribe, rate, and review our show, and share it with an HR leader, executive, or manager who wants a smarter way to think about workplace conflict. If you're looking for training or consultation about high conflict situation for your organization, whether it's HR or healthcare, it doesn't matter where, we'll come. You can find us at highconflictinstitute.com. If it's for your personal life, come to conflictinfluencer.com. Keep learning and practicing the skills. Be kind to yourself and to others while we all try to keep the conflict small and find the missing piece.
It's All Your Fault will return July 16th with the start of Season 10.
It's All Your Fault is a production of True Story FM. Engineering by Andy Nelson. Music by Wolf Samuels, John Coggins, and Ziv Moran. Find the show notes, and transcripts at truestory.fm or highconflictinstitute.com/podcast. If your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show.